Well, there are still people joining, but let's go ahead and get started and folks can come in. Um, Today, our Zoom assembly will be our new Bishop Provisional, Right Reverend Todd Ousley. And Bishop, we just wanted to kind of get to know you as best we can over Zoom. And then, folks, I think Bishop Todd is available for questions and things, but we just wanted to hear a little bit more about his vision for what his job here will be, and um, how to navigate these waters. And I know we talked the other day at a staff meeting about the process of starting the search for a new bishop diocesan. So if you're interested in that, I'm sure he can talk about that as well. But I'll just turn it over to you, Todd.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bobby. It's good to see everyone. It's a nice turnout. I don't see exactly how many are here yet, but looks like 30 plus. So anyway, glad to have you here. Let me tell you just a little bit about me and what I think informs my worldview. I'm a native Texan. I left Texas almost 25 years ago and moved to the state of Michigan, where I began to work as canon in the Diocese of Eastern Michigan. And I tell you about that transition because to move from Texas to Michigan is not only what many would have considered and maybe still consider a counterintuitive move. Uh, it also was a change in landscape that I had to struggle with. Uh, my wife is a native of Michigan, and I fell in love with the state about the same time I fell in love with her. I love the trees. I love the water. I love the four seasons that were available. Being a Texan, where we had just hot and hotter than hot. It was refreshing. But one of the things I discovered very quickly is that there's something about the landscape and the fact that Michigan is surrounded by water, almost as a cul-de-sac that you don't have to drive through to get anywhere. In contrast to Texas, that it forms so much of your attitude and your outlook on life. In Texas, I was taught and raised in a world where everything was possible. That even if you had a bust following a boom, another boom would come after that. The sky was big, the landscape was wide and expansive, all sorts of possibilities. I got to Michigan and I love the trees. But the trees obscure the sky and obscure the landscape. You can't even always fully see a sunset. And I didn't really imagine what that could ever be like. And it affects the attitude of the people, where there's a caution, um, an almost pessimism that enters in, that people know that, yeah, when the bus comes, we'll boom again, but we won't quite boom the way we did before. Um, that affects how everything goes. So I've lived the last 24 plus years in a world where I've had to contend with a cultural attitude of a lack of hopefulness in many cases, and a lack of possibilities, where people's dreams are maybe sometimes big, but they're not huge. Um, so now I get the chance to come to Wyoming, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like I'm coming back to a place where the possibilities are endless, the sky is big, the landscape is there for us to look for miles and miles and to see all the wonders of God's creation. So I'm excited to be in a place that I think is more consistent with my very soul. Um, and what I hope is you're going to see that and experience that in the kind of partnership I bring as your bishop provisional in this diocese. And I consciously use that word of partnership because I want you to know that my intent while I'm here as your bishop is to be a person who listens to you, um, invites you to listen to me, where we can be in conversation and discover together what God is up to in our midst, and what are we as individuals, as congregations, as committees and task forces, as a diocese as a whole, are called to be called to do, and who we're called to be at this time in our lives. Um, yeah, the church gives me a place that occupies a place of oversight and leadership within the church, but it's not an autocratic leadership. That's not the intent of the church. It's not the intent that somebody's going to be there to lord it over you, but rather, as I see my role and what the church intends, is that we're all going to gather at the table together, and we're going to share what we think, what we feel, what we hope and dream for, and that we will honor one another and listen deeply and be changed by one another, all in the name of Jesus and for God's mission in this place. Um, and that's a lot of maybe high talk, high thinking. Where does the rubber meet the road? Well, I think it meets the road in our individual conversations with visits that I make to your place, whether it's a Sunday and liturgical visitation, or whether it's for fellowship, conversation, or wrestling together on the issues that are facing you and the people whom you serve. I want to be a part of that. I want to be at the table with you, and I want to learn from you. Um, so I'm going to be an open door and an open book. I invite your honest, direct conversations and challenges to me. Um, and in exchange, you'll get them from me as well. Uh, I think we're going to have a great time together, and I look forward to that. So rather than me just take up all the airtime here, how about if I'm quiet for a moment and you all ask me some questions, or engage all of us in a conversation about where we're going as the Diocese of Wyoming. Bobby, I'll count on you to call on people if they raise their hand.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if somebody just unmutes and asks a question. I guess while people are thinking of what questions to ask, Bishop, your conversation with us the other day about what sort of process we'll go to develop a profile for the next bishop diocesan. If you want to just how you intend to help us get to that point might be helpful.
Sure, happy to do that. First of all, let me say that historically, the process of sort of officially beginning to say we're going to be actively searching for a new bishop, to the point where you have a new bishop ordained to serve in the diocese, is typically around 18 months to 2 years. Our new presiding bishop, Sean Rowe, is very interested in there being some work done to shorten that period of time. Um, and I'm hopeful that he and his team can actually accomplish that. Having been the lead person on the presiding bishop's staff to help diocese with that, I I'm hopeful, but I also say good luck, Sean, because there are so many factors involved in it, and every diocese is different. That I think if we can make it shorter, that's a good thing, because it's a grueling process. As you know, in processes of leadership change and transition at the congregational level, they can be exhausting and exasperating. So they're going to be looking at that. One of the things that I know from my experience that is helpful, both I think in the quality of the kind of process that you undergo, as well as potentially shortening it to a more reasonable time, is for the profile of the diocese, the development of that to be handled a little bit differently than it has been in most places over history. The typical way is that the standing committee would appoint a search and nominating committee to get the process going, to gather names for who might be the next bishop and to narrow that down and ultimately a ballot to be before you at the convention of the diocese. And in order to do that, there's a profile that's developed. The historic way of doing it is the search and nominating committee organized itself and they did the profile. What I would like to suggest is you have some warning bells go off in your head about that kind of process, because people who are invited to be on a search and nominating committee ideally are going to be selected because they're really good at search and nomination work, which may or may not be the gifts necessary to develop a diocesan profile. It might be, but it isn't necessarily. The other thing is there has been a pattern in the church where the profile has been developed by such a small group of people that the voice of the whole diocese is not adequately tended to in that process. So what I've suggested, and we've rolled out in a few dioceses to, I think, great success, is the standing committee, perhaps with augmentation of some others in the diocese, they put together some parameters about what the profile might look like, a rough draft, something to get the conversation started. And then that is utilized for conversations that happen within the diocese as a whole. So we get as many fingerprints on this as possible, as many voices and as much touch from the people of the diocese. And it's done in a more focused way, not a restrictive way, but focused, so that it's not just a, hey, what do you think we need the next bishop? But rather, this is who we all have agreed that we are, and this is what we think for who we are, that we need as a bishop for this time in our life as a diocese. Once that's done, it actually, as long as you don't have too many glitches in the process, you put out the profile, people apply, people are encouraged to nominate, to allow themselves to be nominated or to nominate themselves. And then there's a regular process of doing paper reviews and Zoom interviews, and then bringing people in to discover hands-on a little bit more about Wyoming, have a discernment retreat. The finalists are selected, approved by the standing committee, and they go before the convention for a vote. It's can be a rigorous process or a grueling process, but it's also filled with great spirit. And I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like because I'm not in charge of bishop elections anymore. But I do have a few opinions that I might throw into the mix. And while I'm listening very carefully to Bishop Rowe and his team, which your leadership will be doing as well. I think Charlize has a question.
Yes.
Hi, Bishop. I'm Charlize. I'm a member of St. Andrews in the Pines in Pinedale, but I live in Colorado Springs. And my question is, when the diocese is developing a profile of the diocese, do they include profiles from all of the churches in the diocese, especially because this isn't a big diocese, so that when the candidates can look at, here are all the churches that are involved and what they're like?
Yeah, good question. Typically what happens is that there are links, because the profiles are published online. The old days of what I call the old Olin Mills pictorial directory style, those are not utilized, but rather it's online, and you utilize the web links to congregations to learn more about what's going on. So what people would be doing is the same thing I did when I was in discernment about being bishop provisional. I got on the website and I clicked on every congregation and went down every pathway that I could to learn more about the local flavor. Certainly some of the themes that would be present in that would be included in the profile, because it's not just this mass entity, a diocese. It's also made up of individual people and congregations in differing contexts with differing understandings of mission and ministry in that place. Oh, thank you. Good question.
Thank you.
Rick.
Greetings, Bishop. So good to have you on board here. And
Thank you.
I feel like we're back 5 years ago in COVID as well, having a business meeting. But it's so good to see you online, and look forward to seeing you in person. My question, completely different from all of this, is if you could describe a little bit, like what is your, how do you keep healthy spiritually in life? Like what is your attempt at practices, because I think we all have visions of what it ought to be. But what do you do to keep yourself grounded spiritually or physically, emotionally? So anyway, that's my question.
Great question. Thank you for that, Rick. And I really like how you framed it as attempt to do that, because I could describe the ideal. I could describe my greatest aspirations, but boy, do I fall short on those. I really, at the very heart of who I am as a spiritual person is two pieces. One is that I utilize Holy Scripture for meditative purposes. You may not hear many bishops admit this, but I have to tell you that my discipline with the daily office is abysmal by those who believe the standard ought to be I'm doing morning prayer, noonday prayer, and evening prayer every day. But instead, what I've done is I've realized that my own pattern is if I focus on a small piece of scripture and I carry that with me throughout the day, or perhaps across days, that really centers me in God's word. And it opens my eyes and ears, my heart to what it is that God is up to in my life and those around me. The other that's really important, and it's part of the reason I am so excited about being here in Wyoming, is I love being outdoors. I love what nature has to offer. And I love the variety of the landscape that I've seen personally and that I've seen in pictures of what Wyoming has to offer. One of the Psalms that's at the heart of my spirituality is I lift up mine eyes to the hills. Where does my help come? It comes from the Lord. So in the house that I'm living in here in Casper, I can go to the corner of the living room where there's windows on both sides of the corner, and I just look out and to the left, and there are the mountains. And I have never experienced living in a place where I can see the mountains like that. Back home, I look out and there are trees and all the wildlife in my yard. I love to get my hands in the dirt in the perennial gardens. And we have a small rustic lake cottage in the national forest in Michigan on an inland lake. And I'm calmed by the presence of the water and the trees, seeing the fish jump and all the birds coming around. So that groundedness in nature, and in scripture in a meditative sort of way.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Would you talk, Bishop, about your vision for visitations? You have some different ideas about how a bishop's visitation to a church might look.
Yeah, and thanks, Bobby. This is an offering I would like to make, and this is a good chance to talk about it because you can get a sense of why I'm thinking that. You know, the typical pattern is you've got a bishop on a Sunday, and sometimes it's a Sunday morning, and there may be one that happens on a Sunday afternoon, but you've got this Sunday visitation, and I see it unfolding in most places as the bishop show. Um, it's it's all about the bishop who's going to show up in investments that look different from what you normally see. Um, Maybe there's confirmations, receptions, reaffirmations. There's the sheet cake that's there for coffee hour that's got welcome bishop on it. Um, and what I get to see in that visit is not the full picture about this congregation and the people who are there. So I would like to offer for us to find some other ways for that visitation to happen. Um, and some of that's happening in these first visits that I'm having, where I'm having coffee or meals or just conversations with people. I'm actually going to be in Ethity and Fort Washakie on Sunday in both places. So wrap your mind around that. 2 Palm Sunday services in a short period of time with a little bit of travel in between. Um, that's already a pretty loaded day. Throw a bishop into the mix and it gets really complicated. So what's happening there is I'm actually a guest of the congregation. Uh, Roxanne has asked that I do vest and that I bless the palms. I do the final blessing, and I might do an absolution in there, but minimizing the bishop there as one who is on stage and takes primary place. Um, I'm happy to do any and all of that because each of your congregations will have different expectations. But I also want to give you permission to say, we want something different from you than the presiding and preaching and confirming and sheet cake afterwards. Uh, we can play around with this and make it much more relational. Um, Not that those can't be relational, but let's collaborate together on what it looks like.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Christy Wallen.
Well, greetings, Bishop, from the Foundation for the Episcopal Diocese of Wyoming.
Hi, Christy.
You have your feet in both organizations, and as we work to make the foundation and diocese more like this, how do you foresee your leadership in your role as a foundation member?
That's a good question. I think that I've got some perspectives that I want to bring to the conversation with the foundation board. So when I say what I'm about to say, it's not something that I intend to impose, but it's rather an offering that I want to make. And that is because the foundation is the foundation of the Episcopal Diocese of Wyoming, it is important that there are multiple mechanisms for the diocese voice to be present in how the foundation carries out its mission. And I think the bishop's role is, in great measure, to be one of those clear voices about what the diocese is about and how the two need to relate together. What I am very encouraged about is that the foundation has made some changes in its bylaws and operations that mean that the bishop is not automatically the president of the foundation. I think that's a really, really healthy move. I think it's healthy because it shows forth a more collaborative and less hierarchical, top-down kind of approach. And I also think it recognizes that the bishop really is not called to chair those kinds of groups, but rather to be a resource and a voice and a reminder within it. I think of it in some small way of the kind of role that I thought was important when I was a rector of a congregation. That I think in all of my time as a parish rector, I chaired one vestry meeting, despite the fact that the canon said I was the chair of the vestry. I always had the senior warden chair that. And what that allowed me to do was to be attentive to the business aspects, but really to have on the spiritual hat when I was a part of the vestry. So, when they're deliberating about some financial issue or a property issue, I could bring a theological perspective to it. And it was just a voice at the table rather than being one who's imposing upon it. So I think with the foundation, that kind of understanding of my role is going to be critical. And we'll see what the foundation board has to say. They may have other ideas.
Well, thank you. We're eager to get to work.
Likewise. I think Linda Fleming had her hand up.
That's what I was thinking. It looked like she did.
I did 2 or 3 times, and then I thought, well, maybe you just thought I was swatting the flies that aren't here yet. So, no, Bishop, how will we schedule visitations? I'm from the Little Snake River Parish down in southern Wyoming, and at Dixon, and we would love to have you come visit, and we're excited to show you some of the things that we do. We're probably one of the smallest groups in the state, so. But how will we schedule?
Well, let me say that is in flux. We are learning as we go about that. There have been some changes with staffing and responsibilities in the office prior to my arrival. And I'll just say that Jeannie Osborne has been tremendous in stepping in to work on my calendar and the visitation schedule. And what she's done at this point has been to receive from various voices around the diocese expressions of where there's a need for us to go, for me to go, and has done some prioritizing on that. And alongside that, sometimes the priority may rise because we're trying to get as many visitations of one form or another in as quickly as possible. So we're doing kind of regional pieces. Jeannie, you're on. Why don't you just give a preview of what this weekend and upcoming weekends are looking like?
Yeah, so of course things change moment by moment. So some thoughts that we originally had have been adjusted for this weekend due to the death of Reverend Chuck Clark. And so this weekend, Friday, Bishop will be visiting Riverton and Kinnear. Saturday, he will be attending the funeral services and reception for Chuck. And then he mentioned earlier that he will be on the reservation Sunday. Easter weekend, he is not scheduled for visitations. Do you want to speak to that, Bishop, or do you want me to?
Sure, I'll just go ahead and quickly say that my experience both as a parish priest and as a bishop was that For the most part, congregations tolerate graciously the appearance of the bishop on complex complex Sundays. And so I try to be low key on those. So I'll be somewhere on Easter Sunday, but I'll be sitting in a pew. Not that I'm not open to invitations for high holy days, but I don't intend to impose myself when you probably got your own patterns that might go even better if a bishop doesn't show up.
Thank you.
And so the same kind of ideas are going to be continuing in subsequent weeks where essentially, for the most part, we'll think of a couple of things on a Friday, maybe a couple of things on a Saturday, if that's what works out, and then 1 to 2 things on Sundays. I think it's also important to know that I do have some vision issues that make night driving difficult for me, or less safe, shall we say. So we're also being mindful of where am I ending on a Sunday, and can I get back to Casper before the sun goes down?
I'll also just add, right, since this confirming Bishop Todd Ousley as our bishop provisional happened in March, normally we would have like bishop visitations scheduled out a year in advance, which is great. We hadn't started that process until we knew we were going to have a bishop. And so there's going to be a little bit of catch up while we slowly work our way further out into the schedule. So
If you've got a special need, or a need that you need to have me there sooner rather than later, or if you've got a festival, a special celebration, some event that's happening, let Jeannie know that, and all of that can be put into the mix.
Yeah.
We're making it invitational. I want to get everywhere as quickly as possible. But we're not going to just announce to you we're going to be there. We may offer a date and see if it works for you. Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
And I know we've talked about some of the churches have been waiting for confirmations for quite a while. So if you are one of those churches, let Jeannie know that, and we'll
Yes.
try and get that taken care of a little quicker.
Hey, this is Warren Murphy. Can you hear me? You can't see me. Sorry.
We hear you, Warren.
We can hear you, yes.
Yes. Bishop, I know I'm the longest serving clergy in Wyoming that's still active. And it's almost 50 years, 49, I believe. And one of the things we've sort of been known for in the state, especially amongst other churches, is our whole understanding of what justice is and how justice should be dealt with, and how churches in particular can do that. And I'm just wondering how we are able to carry that out in Wyoming. And this is for the entire country as well as the state of Wyoming. I have to tell you that I wrote an article about that in a way that was decided not to print. That was going to be in the magazine that comes out periodically. And somehow the decision was made not to print that because it might be too controversial. I just went back and looked at it. I thought it was wonderful. It didn't mention whose name, and but it talked about what's happening in the state, especially with people we know and love who are losing their jobs, and many of the issues we fought for in the past are now no longer going to be considered important. And I'm just wondering how we can really can we be out there in a justice mode? And let me give you one example with Bishop Smiley. and the foundation. When I was on the foundation board, one of the things we helped with was the issue of suicide in Wyoming and why it's so prevalent, and that we're usually the #1 state in the nation that has a high rate per capita of suicide. And the legislature had money going out for suicide prevention. And all of a sudden they decided they weren't going to fund that anymore. And we made a decision as a board that we would replace that money from the foundation for 1 year. And Bishop Smiley, in his justice mode, which wasn't his major thing, but he was in a justice mode, wrote a letter to every legislator saying, you have made a mistake. This is an important issue that can't be ignored. We will pay for this in lieu of you, the legislature, for 1 year. And we did that, and he received a lot of crap from legislators about that decision personally. But the next year, that money was back. Justice does work. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on issues like that. Thank you. I'll see you Saturday at Chuck Clark's funeral.
Good. I look forward to meeting you in person, Warren. And others who will be there as well. Make a point to come up to me and help me put names and faces together. That's a really good question, Warren. And you know, the answer that I would have given to you prior to 2016 would have been a bit different. I think we have spent the last 8 or 9 years in a time where the landscape around how the church engages in issues of justice has become more complicated. And what I mean by that is not that that we're probably the call to speak about justice and around justice issues is even more important today than it ever has been in most of our memories. But the environment is more divided than we've had in a number of years as well. And I think what we've got to do is we've got to be in some really careful and deep conversations with one another, with different perspectives and different approaches to understand how we can speak with a strong voice about issues of justice, while also recognizing that speaking with a strong voice of justice means that we do no harm to those who may think very differently from us. How do we maintain our relationships? How do we be forces for reconciliation rather than forces of division? And you know, any number of us could be gathered around in a conversation over coffee, and we could have different perspectives about what those lines are and what the lines are between being engaged appropriately in Christian as a Christian voice versus getting into matters of the state or into politics. It's not a nice, clean line. So I think that this time is going to be really critical for us as a church to not only claim our voice, to maintain our voice for justice, but to claim it in ways that have great strength and great power, but also continue to be a part of reconciling and conversations that are based in love.
Bishop, along that same line, one of the things that our leadership committees have been doing, the Standing Committee, the Commission on Ministry, the Diocesan Council, and the Foundation came together, and you were able to join us for part of that with Chris Hart at Casper College last fall. And a lot of that talked about how we communicate with one another, you know, as we develop this communication covenant, and how we develop each of our boards to be stronger and better together. And I guess I just would wonder how you see that work going forward, how you see your role in supporting that work or allowing us to continue down those roads to develop ourselves as the Episcopal Church in Wyoming with a bishop that comes alongside us rather than leads us or directs us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. The covenant that has been made among the boards and with the staff and the bishop has a lot of words, and it expresses a lot of really deep effort on the part of all the participants in crafting that. I'm a latecomer to that process, so I can't go into detail about everything that's on there, but as I've read through it multiple times, what I see is that it's really about respect for one another. Just if I had to put it in one sentence, it's about respecting each other, about listening, about recognizing your role, and exercising that role and not someone else's role, about giving feedback in love and respect. And I think as the leadership bodies continue to work through that and practice it, then rolling those principles out for others to consider, for vestries to consider, for individual groups within congregations, for it to be a mark of how we live together as the people who are the Diocese of Wyoming. It's really profound work, and I want to commend all those who've been responsible for bringing Chris Hart in as a consultant and for engaging in the process of developing it, because it's a real watershed moment in the life of the diocese to get these various leadership bodies and individuals together to all be rowing in the same direction. It's a great time to be coming in. Thanks, Bobby.
And Charlize, you have your hand up again.
Yes. I've been recently doing the On Sacred Ground training, which I'm finding very spiritually challenging, motivating. And I'm seeing the wisdom of having that training available to everybody. I'm assuming, Bishop, that you've taken it. Do you see it as an important growth factor for the leadership, both lay and at the diocesan level in the church? And how do you see promoting that to congregations and regular people?
Yeah, well, ideally, everybody who's a part of the Episcopal Church in Wyoming would be a participant. I think that would be fantastic. I am both an idealist and a realist. So I think what we've got to do is continue the good work of encouragement. And I think really the best way, it's not the only way, but the best way to get more people involved with Sacred Ground is just word of mouth. Those who are doing it, who've done it, who are evangelists for that program. I can join in that with you, and I'll need to be speaking with those who are responsible on the ways that they would like for me to be a proponent for Sacred Ground. But I think it's one of the best things that's come along in a long time, and is very appropriate for this time in the life of the church and the life of this country.
Thank you.
Other questions? One of the things we found, just to follow up on that, Charlize, those of us who went on this Alabama pilgrimage, and many of them have already taken sacred ground or were in the process of taking sacred ground compared to last year's group, where there weren't as many. It really sets the foundation for learning and growing more. So yes, I'm a big proponent of everybody taking sacred ground. And I'm sure there'll be more. Laura Gilbert just had organized 3 of those groups, and I assume, Laura, we're going to try and do that again at some point. Well, Laura, why don't you talk about next month's thing too, and that?
Okay, sure. So I would love to organize some more sacred ground groups. I think that it's been extremely not only successful just for participants, the number of participants, the groups filled up right away. People were extremely interested, but the content is so important. So I think we should absolutely do it again. One of the biggest hurdles is making sure that we have good leaders. So we'll continue to recruit folks who are willing to put in the work to lead those groups. And then as far as what's coming up in April, well, it's the end of this month, we are looking at Sabbath as a holy practice for communities and individuals, because, as I've said before, ministry is hard, and we all have run the risk of burnout and getting tired and exhausted. And so I thought it would be good at this time, while we're doing a lot of work in the church, to take a look at what Sabbath is and how Sabbath can help us renew and rest in God.
And that's Saturday the 26th?
Saturday the 26th. Yes, and the workshop that's happening that day is being led by Rebecca Hall, who is a Christian spirituality expert, and she will get us started. And then we will also have some regional, throughout the summer, we'll have some regional workshops that will help us work some of what we learned from Rebecca into our churches and into our lives.
Laura, is that anticipated to be recorded?
No, I'm sorry, it won't be. There will be a lot of small group work, Randy, so there won't be a lot of stuff to be able to be recorded. But the regional workshops, which will be easier to access because they'll be nearby, more people, it will not be required that you have been to the larger workshop.
Good deal. Other announcements folks have. Our Zoom assembly in May will also be a second Thursday, because the first Thursday is the Chris Hart leadership gathering. So it will be May 8th. And that topic will be confirmation classes that have been approved by the Commission on Ministry for use in your churches, and Laura Gilbert will talk through those. So if you're interested in anything more we need to know about that, Laura, other than that you're just going to talk about it? Or?
I'm going to invite some of the people who helped develop our confirmation guide, and we will walk through sort of the history of how we got where we're at and some of the uses of the guide. And I don't know, we haven't had an organizational meeting yet, so hopefully in that organizational meeting, we're going to come up with something brilliant to say.
All right, I'm sure you will. No doubt. Other questions for Bishop Todd before we close? Well, thank you, Bishop.
Thank you.
Joel has a question, sorry. Joel? Are you there, Joel? Maybe he had an accidental hand up. All right. Well, Easter blessings to all of you as we approach Holy Week. It's going to be busy for most of us, I know. But, and again, safe travels for all who will be attending Chuck's funeral on Saturday. And look forward to seeing you again on Zoom next month.